I was standing in our realtor's office when I saw it, my signature on mortgage paperwork for a house I'd never seen. The elegant 4-bedroom Victorian in the suburbs that my husband Ryan had apparently purchased for his girlfriend using our joint savings. What he didn't know was that the folder sitting on my lap didn't contain the refinancing documents he was expecting. Instead, it held evidence of every penny he'd stolen from our accounts over the past year, along with divorce papers I'd prepared 3 weeks earlier when I discovered his double life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember the exact moment my carefully constructed life began to crumble. It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon, in April, unusually warm for springtime in Portland. I had finished my shift at the hospital early, a rare occurrence in my hectic schedule as an ER nurse. After 6 years of marriage to Ryan, our lives had settled into a comfortable routine. He managed a successful insurance agency downtown, while I worked long hours saving lives and coming home exhausted, often too tired for anything beyond microwaved dinners and half watching whatever show Ryan had chosen for the evening. That particular Thursday, I decided to surprise Ryan by picking up lunch from his favorite Thai place near his office. We hadn't connected much lately, both busy with demanding careers, with him working later and later hours as his business expanded. I thought an impromptu lunch date might help bridge the growing distance between us. When I arrived at his office building, I nodded at the security guard who recognized me from previous visits and headed straight for the elevators. Ryan's insurance agency occupied the entire 8th floor, evidence of his success over the past decade. As the elevator doors opened, I felt a flutter of anticipation. It had been months since I'd surprised him like this. The reception area was quiet, with Melissa, Ryan's longtime receptionist, away from her desk. I walked through the open office space toward Ryan's corner office, food bags in hand, noticing how several employees glanced up with strange expressions as I passed. One woman, Claire from accounting, actually looked away quickly when our eyes met, her face flushing red. I thought little of it at the time, focused instead on my surprise for Ryan. His office door was closed, which was unusual. Ryan typically kept an open door policy with his team unless he was in important meetings. I checked his calendar on Melissa's desk, no meetings scheduled for the lunch hour. Balancing the food in one hand, I knocked lightly before turning the handle. The sound that greeted me wasn't Ryan's usual welcoming voice, but hushed whispers that fell silent the moment. The door cracked open. I pushed it wider to find Ryan leaning against his desk, his back to me, speaking quietly to a woman I'd never seen before. She was stunning, tall with flowing auburn hair, wearing an expensive-looking cream blouse and tailored slacks. Ryan's hand rested casually on her waist in a gesture of intimate familiarity that made my stomach drop. They both turned at the sound of the door, and I watched as Ryan's expression transformed from tender affection to shock to carefully controlled neutrality in the span of 2 seconds. The woman stepped away from him immediately, her hand brushing discreetly against his as they separated. "Lauren," Ryan's voice held forced cheerfulness. "What a surprise! I didn't expect to see you today." I stood frozen in the doorway, the Thai food suddenly heavy in my hands. "Obviously," I managed to say, my eyes moving between Ryan and the unknown woman. "This is Jessica Reynolds," Ryan said smoothly, gesturing to the woman who now stood with perfect posture, a professional smile fixed on her face. "Our new regional sales director. We were just discussing the quarterly numbers." Jessica extended her hand, which I reluctantly took, noting her firm grip and the flawless manicure. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Lauren. Ryan talks about you constantly." Her voice held a slight southern accent, and something else I couldn't immediately identify. A note of challenge, perhaps, or confidence that seemed excessive for an ordinary professional introduction. "Funny," I replied, finding my voice. "He's never mentioned you." An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. I placed the food bags on Ryan's desk, suddenly not hungry at all. I brought your favorite pad thai. I thought we could have lunch together, but I see you're busy with quarterly numbers. Ryan stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder that felt unnaturally heavy. That's so thoughtful, honey. Jessica and I were just wrapping up. Why don't you stay and we can all have lunch together? The suggestion was so absurd that I almost laughed. Instead, I shook my head. I should get back to the hospital. They might need me. It was a lie. I had the rest of the day off, but I needed space to process what I'd just witnessed. I'll leave you two alone, Jessica said, gathering what looked like property listings from Ryan's desk. We can finish our discussion later. She slipped the papers into an expensive leather portfolio, coral-colored and embossed with golden initials, before heading toward the door. Lovely meeting you, Lauren. As she passed, I caught the scent of an unfamiliar perfume, something expensive and floral that lingered in the air after she was gone. Ryan immediately launched into casual conversation as if nothing unusual had happened, but my mind was racing, replaying every detail of the scene I'd interrupted. The way they'd been standing, the comfort of their body language. The papers Jessica had quickly gathered up. How's your day been? Busy at the ER? Ryan asked, unpacking the Thai food with exaggerated interest. Who is she really, Ryan? I asked, ignoring his attempt at normalcy. He looked up, his expression perfectly confused. I told you, Jessica Reynolds, our new regional director. We hired her last month to expand our market share in the Southern Territory. And do you always stand that close to your employees when discussing quarterly numbers? I was surprised by the steadiness of my voice when my heart was pounding so violently in my chest. Ryan laughed, a sound I now realized was slightly forced. Come on, Lauren, don't be ridiculous. We were looking at the same spreadsheet on my tablet. He gestured to the device sitting on his desk. If you're going to be jealous of every woman I work with, we're going to have problems. His immediate pivot to making me sound irrational sent a warning signal through my brain. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This was a tactic he'd used before when caught in smaller lies, turning the tables to make me doubt myself. Usually I would backpedal, apologize for jumping to conclusions. This time something stopped me. Perhaps it was the lingering scent of Jessica's perfume, or the way Ryan's employees had looked at me as I walked through the office. I'm not jealous, I said carefully. I'm observant. And what I observed didn't look like a professional discussion about quarterly numbers. Ryan's expression hardened slightly before he caught himself and softened again. Lauren, I love you. Jessica is a colleague, nothing more. You're exhausted from your shifts at the hospital, and your imagination is running wild. He came around the desk and pulled me into an embrace that felt practiced rather than passionate. Let's enjoy this food you brought and talk about something else. How about that weekend trip to the coast we've been planning? I allowed myself to be held, but my mind was cataloging details. The unfamiliar cologne mingling with his usual scent, the slight stiffness in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting to his phone on the desk. This wasn't the Ryan I knew. Or perhaps more accurately, this wasn't the Ryan I thought I knew. Actually, I should go, I said, pulling away. I just remembered I promised to pick up some things for my mom. Another lie, but I needed space to think. Enjoy the pad thai. I'll see you at home tonight. Ryan didn't try very hard to make me stay, which told me everything I needed to know. As I walked back through the office, I noticed something else. A framed photo that had always sat on Ryan's desk, showing us laughing together on our honeymoon in Hawaii, was nowhere to be seen. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with possibilities, each more painful than the last. When I reached our house, a modest two-story in a quiet neighborhood we'd chosen for its good schools and proximity to both our workplaces. I sat in the driveway for nearly 20 minutes, unable to go inside. Our home suddenly felt like a stage set, a place where we'd been acting out roles rather than living authentic lives. Eventually, I entered the silent house and headed straight for Ryan's home office. I'd never been the type to snoop through my husband's things. I'd always believed trust was the foundation of our relationship. But that foundation had just developed a significant crack, and I needed to know how deep it went. Ryan's desk was meticulously organized as always. His laptop was password protected, but I knew most of his passwords, variations on his childhood, address, and dog's name. Sure enough, Jasper 2211 unlocked his personal computer. What I found sent ice through my veins. First, there were emails, hundreds of them, between Ryan and Jessica Reynolds dating back 8 months. They began professionally enough, but quickly evolved into something deeply personal. I read enough to confirm my worst fears before moving on to his financial records. Our joint accounts showed unexplained withdrawals over the past 6 months. Small. Enough not to immediately raise alarms, but substantial when added together. Nearly $87,000 of our savings had disappeared in increments of $5,000 to $10,000. Then I found the property listings, the same ones I'd glimpsed in Jessica's coral portfolio at the office. Houses in Westlake, an upscale suburb 30 minutes outside Portland. Homes far more expensive than we could afford on our combined salaries, with one listing circled and marked with a star. I was searching for more information when I heard Ryan's key in the front door. Quickly closing the laptop and returning everything to its precise position, I slipped out of his office and into our bedroom, my heart racing. I grabbed a book from my nightstand and pretended to be reading when Ryan appeared in the doorway. 20 minutes later. "You're home early," he said, loosening his tie. "Slow day at the ER," I replied, amazed at how normal my voice sounded when everything inside me was screaming. "How was the pad thai?" "Delicious," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed to remove his shoes. "Listen, about Jessica." "It's fine," I interrupted, not wanting to hear whatever carefully constructed explanation he'd prepared on the drive. "Home." "You're right. I was being silly. Work stress getting to me." Relief washed over his face, too much relief for someone with nothing to hide. "Exactly. You've been working crazy hours." He leaned over to kiss my forehead, and I forced myself not to recoil. "I've got to head back to the office soon. Big client meeting this evening. Don't wait up for me, okay?" I nodded, the pieces falling into place. His late nights, the business trips that had become more frequent, the gradual emptying of our savings account. "Actually," I said as he turned to leave, "I've been thinking about our finances. I'd like to get more involved in our long-term planning. Maybe we could talk to that financial advisor your brother recommended?" Ryan paused, a flicker of something, concern, panic, crossing his face before he composed himself. "Sure, that's a good idea. Let me set something up next week when things slow down a bit." After he left, I sat motionless on our bed for nearly an hour, processing what I'd discovered and calculating my next steps. I wasn't going to confront Ryan immediately. That would only give him time to hide evidence and construct more elaborate lies. Instead, I needed to understand the full extent of his deception before deciding how to proceed. The next morning, I called in sick to the hospital, something I'd done only twice in 5 years of working there. My supervisor, Diane, sounded concerned and offered to adjust my schedule if I needed more rest. I thanked her and promised to be back tomorrow, then began my investigation in earnest. My first call was to our bank. I explained that I was reviewing our joint finances and needed detailed statements for the past year. The representative asked several verification questions before confirming they would email comprehensive records within the hour. Next, I contacted 3 divorce attorneys recommended by a hospital colleague who had recently gone through her own difficult separation. I scheduled consultations with all 3 for the following day. By mid-morning, the bank statements had arrived, and I spread them across our dining room table, highlighting each unexplained withdrawal with methodical precision. The pattern was clear. Every 2 weeks, Ryan moved money from our joint savings to an account I didn't recognize. The account number was the same each time, but the transfer descriptions varied. Investment opportunity, property evaluation, business development. I was still examining the statements when my phone rang, a Portland number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Lauren Thompson?" a woman's voice inquired. "Yes, speaking." "This is Valerie Martin from Portland Regional Credit Union. I'm calling about the mortgage application you and your husband submitted last week. We need a few additional documents to complete the approval process." I gripped the phone tighter, my mind racing. "I'm sorry, what mortgage application?" There was a pause on the line. "For the property on 1823 Westlake Drive. Your husband Ryan submitted the paperwork, but both your names are on the application since you're co-borrowers." The address matched the starred listing I'd seen in Ryan's office. "I see. And what documents do you need from me?" I kept my voice steady, playing along to gather information. "We need your most recent pay stubs, verification of employment, and signatures on a few disclosure forms. Your husband indicated you'd be coming in together tomorrow to complete everything, but I wanted to make sure you had all the necessary paperwork ready." "Thank you for calling, Valerie. We'll bring everything tomorrow." I ended the call and immediately looked up the address online. 1823. Westlake Drive was a stunning Victorian with a wraparound porch, 4 bedrooms, and a meticulously landscaped yard. The listed price was $875,000, far beyond what we could legitimately afford. The property description mentioned it had been recently reduced and was priced to sell quickly. The pieces were coming together, forming a picture I could barely comprehend. Ryan was buying a house with our savings, a house I knew nothing about, in a neighborhood we'd never discussed, at a price point that would require both our incomes to sustain. And based on the emails I'd read, it wasn't intended for us to live in together. That afternoon, I drove to Westlake to see the house in person. It stood at the end of a tree-lined street, its elegant facade practically glowing in the spring sunshine. As I sat in my car staring at what was apparently my future property, a familiar coral-colored portfolio caught my eye. Jessica Reynolds emerged from the front door, accompanied by a middle-aged man in a suit who was gesturing enthusiastically toward the landscaping. A realtor, presumably. I slumped down in my seat, watching as they toured the grounds together. Jessica appeared completely at home, pointing to various features of the property with the confidence of someone who already considered it theirs. They spent about 20 minutes outside before returning to the house, never noticing my car parked half a block away. When they disappeared inside, I started my engine and drove to the nearest coffee shop to collect my thoughts. My hands shook as I ordered a latte I knew I wouldn't drink. The barista gave me a concerned look, but didn't comment on my obvious distress. Seated in a corner booth, I made a list of what I knew for certain. 1. Ryan was having an affair with Jessica Reynolds. 2. They were planning to purchase a house together. 3. The money for the down payment, at least $87,000 that I could trace, had come from our joint savings. 4. I was somehow included on the mortgage application, without my knowledge or consent. The last point was the most baffling, and potentially the most useful. How had Ryan included me on a mortgage application without my signature? Had he forged it? Or was there some other explanation? I needed to see those mortgage documents. And I needed legal advice before confronting Ryan with what I knew. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Client dinner tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." I stared at those last 2 words, "love you," and felt nothing but a cold emptiness where warm emotion should have been. I replied with a casual, "Okay, have fun," and added the predictable heart emoji I always included, maintaining the facade while planning my next move. That evening, I called my older sister Megan, the only person I trusted completely with something this sensitive. She lived in Seattle, far enough away to not be part of our Portland social circle, but close enough to provide real support if needed. "Hey, stranger," she answered cheerfully. "To what do I owe this midweek call?" "Meg," I said, my voice finally breaking. "I need help." The story poured out of me. The unexpected visit to Ryan's office, the discoveries on his laptop, the mysterious house in Westlake, and the mortgage application bearing my name that I'd never seen. Megan listened without interrupting, only occasionally making sounds of disbelief or outrage. When I finished, she was quiet for several moments. "Lauren," she finally said, "this is serious. Not just the affair, that's bad enough, but he's committing financial fraud by putting your name on a mortgage without your consent. That affects your credit, your financial future, everything." "I know," I whispered. "I don't know what to do. If I confront him now, he'll just lie more and might hide evidence I need." "You need that mortgage application," Megan said firmly, "and you need to see exactly what he's signed your name to. Then you need a good lawyer, not just for divorce, but possibly for financial fraud." "I have appointments with 3 attorneys tomorrow," I said. "Good, and you need somewhere safe to go when this all comes to a head. I can be there in 3 hours if you need me." Her immediate offer of support loosened the tight band of anxiety around my chest slightly. "Not yet. I need to gather more information first, but maybe have a go bag ready?" "Already mentally packing," Megan assured me. "And Lauren, document everything. Take photos of any evidence you find. Forward those emails to a private account he can't access. If he's been this deceptive about your finances, who knows what else he might do when cornered." After we hung up, I followed her advice, creating a new email account and forwarding key evidence from Ryan's laptop after sneaking back into his office. I photographed the bank statements showing the suspicious transfers. I made copies of our tax returns, investment accounts, and insurance policies, anything that might be relevant in untangling our financial lives. As I worked methodically through our records, a curious emotional shift occurred. The initial shock and hurt began to crystallize into something harder, more focused. This wasn't just about Ryan's betrayal of our marriage vows. It was about his willful destruction of our financial security and his apparent willingness to commit fraud using my name. The personal deception was painful, but the calculated financial betrayal awakened something fierce and protective in me. By midnight, I had compiled a comprehensive dossier of Ryan's financial activities over the past year. The pattern was even clearer with all the evidence organized chronologically. He had been systematically liquidating our assets, moving funds, through various accounts before they landed in what I now suspected was a private account he shared with Jessica. Our retirement savings remained untouched, likely because he couldn't access them without raising immediate red flags. But our emergency fund, the money we'd saved for a future family, and even the inheritance I'd received when my father passed away, had all been quietly siphoned away. When Ryan returned home just after 1 a.m., I was in bed with the lights off, pretending to be asleep. He moved quietly through his bedtime routine before sliding in beside me. The scent of unfamiliar perfume clung to his skin, not even disguised. By the shower he'd obviously taken somewhere else before coming home. In the darkness, I lay perfectly still, listening to his breathing gradually even out as he fell asleep, seemingly unburdened by conscience. I wondered how long he had been living this double life, how many nights he had lain beside me planning his future with another woman while spending the money we had worked so hard to save. The Ryan I thought I knew, the man who had held my hand through my father's funeral, who had celebrated every career milestone with genuine pride, who had talked about building a family and growing old together, seemed to have never existed at all. Or perhaps he had existed once, but had gradually transformed into this stranger sleeping beside me, capable of breathtaking deception and casual cruelty. Either possibility was devastating in its own way. Sleep eventually came in fitful bursts, and I woke before dawn with a clear sense of purpose. Today, I would meet with attorneys, learn my options, and see those mortgage documents. Today, I would begin reclaiming my life from the elaborate fraud it had become. The first attorney I met, Patricia Weber, occupied a sleek downtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. Her reputation as one of Portland's toughest divorce lawyers was evident in the confident set of her shoulders and the direct assessment in her gaze as I outlined my situation. "Before we proceed further," she said when I had finished my account, "I need to ask, are you certain you want a divorce? Some couples recover from infidelity with proper counseling." "It's not just the affair," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice remained. "It's the systematic financial deception. He's stolen our savings, Ms. Weber, and somehow put my name on a mortgage for a house his girlfriend was touring yesterday. That crosses a line I can't come back from." Something like respect flickered in her eyes. "In that case, we need to discuss strategy. Oregon is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets should be divided fairly, though not necessarily equally. However," she leaned forward slightly, "if we can prove financial fraud or what's called marital waste, using marital funds for an affair or other purposes contrary to the marriage, we may be able to secure a more favorable settlement for you." By the time I left Weber's office, I had a preliminary plan and a retainer agreement to review. The second attorney, Mark Donovan, asked different questions, focusing on the potential criminal aspects of Ryan's actions. "Forging your signature on mortgage documents is fraud," he stated flatly. "That's a criminal offense that goes beyond family court. Have you considered filing a police report?" The thought hadn't occurred to me, and I hesitated. "I want to see the actual documents first. I need to understand exactly what he's done before taking that step." Donovan nodded. "Wise approach, but keep it as an option. Sometimes the threat of criminal charges can motivate a more reasonable divorce settlement." The third consultation, with Sarah Jameson, proved most insightful. After listening carefully to my story, she asked a question neither of the other attorneys had raised. "Lauren, what do you want out of this process? Not just financially, but personally." The question caught me off guard. What did I want? The automatic answer was to hurt Ryan as deeply as he had hurt me, but saying that aloud felt beneath the person I had always tried to be. I began, then paused to find the truth. "I want to protect myself financially. I want to understand how the person I trusted most could betray me so completely. And I want to ensure that the life I've worked to build isn't destroyed by his actions." Sarah nodded slowly. "Those are excellent starting points. Let's talk about how we achieve those goals while causing the least additional damage to you in the process." Her balanced approach resonated with me, and by the end of our meeting, I had decided to retain her as my attorney. Sarah's parting advice stuck with me as I prepared for my next challenge. "When you go to the credit union today, stay calm and curious," she counseled. "Don't accuse anyone of anything yet. Just gather information. The more you know before confrontation, the stronger your position will be." At 2 p.m., I arrived at Portland Regional Credit Union, having confirmed with Valerie Martin that the mortgage documents were ready for review. I had told her I wanted to look everything over before Ryan arrived, citing my busy hospital schedule as the reason. She had been accommodating, setting up a private conference room for me. "Mrs. Thompson," Valerie greeted me warmly, "I have everything prepared for you. Your husband mentioned you might come in separately due to your work commitments." "Yes, our schedules rarely align these days," I replied, the irony of this truth not lost on me. "Well, he's taken care of most of the paperwork already. We just need your signatures on a few remaining documents to complete the process." She led me to a conference room where a thick folder lay open on the table. "I'll give you some privacy. To review everything, just let me know if you have questions." As soon as she closed the door, I began carefully examining each page. The mortgage application was comprehensive. Property details, loan terms, income verification, and signatures. My signature appeared on multiple pages, alongside Ryan's. Except they weren't my signatures at all. They were reasonable approximations, but with subtle differences only I would recognize. The loop of my L was too rounded, the cross on my T too long. More disturbing was the loan amount, $650,000, with a down payment of $225,000. The application indicated that the down payment funds were coming from joint savings and investments. Our joint savings had never held anywhere near that amount. Where had the additional money come from? I photographed every page discreetly, with my phone, paying special attention to the forged signatures and the financial statements. Then I asked Valerie to make me complete copies to review with our financial advisor. "Of course," she said, seemingly pleased by my diligence. "The property is quite an investment, but with both your incomes, the bank is very comfortable with the loan terms. Your husband mentioned you might be reducing your hours at the hospital once you move in?" I maintained my composure despite the shock of this new information. "Did he discuss any other plans for the property with you?" "Just that it would be your primary residence and that you were both excited about the school district for future family planning." She smiled warmly. "It's a beautiful home. You've made an excellent choice." The depth of Ryan's deception was staggering. He had created an entire fictional future to secure this mortgage. A future where we would live together in this house, start a family, and I would scale back my career. All while he was actively involved with Jessica and systematically draining our accounts. I thanked Valerie for her help and left with the complete copy of the mortgage application, my mind racing with implications. Ryan had committed clear fraud by forging my signature. He had misrepresented our financial situation to secure a loan neither of us could afford alone. And most tellingly, he had created this elaborate fiction while simultaneously planning a life with Jessica. What did that mean for their relationship? Was she aware of the extent of his deception? Or was he manipulating her as thoroughly as he had manipulated me? As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Meeting with Westlake Mortgage Broker tomorrow at 10 a.m. Can you get the morning off? Important final step." So tomorrow was to be the official signing, the culmination of his elaborate scheme. I replied simply, "I'll be there." That evening, I met with Sarah Jameson again, showing her the mortgage documents and explaining the situation with the credit union. Her expression grew increasingly grave as she reviewed the evidence. "This is clear fraud," she confirmed, "and it gives us significant leverage in divorce proceedings. But more importantly, it protects you from being held responsible for this mortgage." "What do you recommend as next steps?" I asked. Sarah looked thoughtful. "We have several options. We could contact the credit union immediately to report the fraud, which would trigger an investigation and likely criminal charges. Or," she paused, "we could allow tomorrow's meeting to proceed and confront Ryan directly with what you know. Which approach gives me the most protection?" "Legally, reporting the fraud immediately is safest. But practically speaking, confronting Ryan with evidence in hand, in a public setting where he can't easily manipulate the situation, might give you more control over how this unfolds." I considered the options carefully. Part of me wanted to run straight to the authorities and let the legal system handle everything. But another part, the part that had spent 6 years building a life with this man, needed the closure of a direct confrontation. If I confront him tomorrow, what precautions should I take? Sarah outlined several protective measures: bringing a witness, recording the conversation where legal, having financial documents and evidence secured in multiple locations, and ensuring I had a safe place to go afterward. And Lauren, she added seriously, people who commit this level of fraud don't always react rationally when exposed. Have a safety plan in place. I called Megan that evening and asked if she could drive down to Portland immediately. Without hesitation, she agreed, promising to arrive by midnight. I'll bring reinforcements too, she added. Jake wants to help. Her husband, a former military man built like a linebacker, would certainly provide an intimidating presence if needed. While waiting for Megan, I packed essential documents, clothes, and irreplaceable personal items in a small suitcase, which I hid in the trunk of my car. I transferred half the funds from the one remaining joint account Ryan hadn't touched to, a new account in my name only, following Sarah's advice about protecting immediate living expenses. Then I prepared for the confrontation that would end my marriage but begin my reclamation. Megan and Jake arrived just before midnight, grim-faced and determined to help. We spent an hour reviewing the plan for tomorrow, with Jake volunteering to accompany me to the credit union while Megan waited nearby with the car running. You know, Megan said as we finally prepared for bed, when Dad died, he told me to always look out for you. I don't think this is what he had in mind, but I'm pretty sure he'd be proud of how you're handling it. Her words brought the first tears I'd allowed myself since discovering Ryan's betrayal. I keep wondering if I should have seen this coming, I whispered. Were there signs I missed? Megan wrapped her arms around me. Lauren, this isn't on you. Some people are just exceptionally good at living double lives. And from what you've shown me, Ryan went to extraordinary lengths to hide what he was doing. Sleep came more easily with my sister in the guest room and her husband on the living room couch. For the first time in weeks, I felt protected rather than vulnerable. Whatever happened tomorrow, I wouldn't face it alone. Morning arrived with a text from Ryan confirming our 10 a.m. appointment at the credit union. This is the final step, he wrote. After today, our future is secure. The irony of his words was not lost on me as I prepared for the day, choosing a professional outfit that made me feel armored and confident. I placed the folder containing copies of the forged mortgage documents, bank statements showing the systematic draining of our accounts, and printed emails between Ryan and Jessica in my largest purse. Ready? Jake asked as I emerged from the bedroom. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what was to come. As ready as I'll ever be. The three of us drove separately to the credit union, Jake with me and Megan in her own car, positioned strategically in the parking lot with a clear view of the entrance. As we pulled in, I saw Ryan's car already there, parked next to a sleek red BMW I didn't recognize. That's probably Jessica's car, I told Jake. I didn't expect her to be here. Does that change the plan? He asked, his expression concerned. Lauren and I have been having some personal issues, but the finances are exactly as I represented them. He turned to me, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Think very carefully about what you're doing. You're making accusations you can't prove. Jake stepped forward, his presence solid and reassuring beside me. Actually, she can prove quite a lot. Would you like to see the evidence we've gathered about the systematic draining of joint accounts? Or perhaps the forged signatures analyzed by a handwriting expert? Or maybe the emails between you and Ms. Reynolds discussing your plans for this property? Ryan's face drained of color. You went through my email? Just like you went through our savings, I replied evenly. The difference is that I was looking for the truth while you were hiding it. Valerie cleared her throat. I need to involve my supervisor and our legal department immediately. If there's evidence of fraud on a mortgage application, we have protocols that must be followed. Of course, I agreed. I'm happy to cooperate fully with your investigation. My attorney has prepared a statement outlining the situation. I handed Valerie a sealed envelope Sarah had prepared. This includes contact information if your legal team needs to reach me. Ryan lunged for the envelope, but Jake smoothly intercepted him, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "That wouldn't be wise," he said quietly. The next hour unfolded in a blur of controlled chaos. Valerie's supervisor appeared, followed by someone from the credit union's legal department. Ryan alternated between attempting to charm his way out of the situation and making veiled threats about what would happen when we got home. Jessica sat in stunned silence, occasionally checking her phone with trembling hands. When the credit union officials temporarily stepped out to confer, Jessica finally spoke directly to me. "I truly didn't know about the forged signatures or that he was taking money from your joint accounts." Her voice was small, stripped of its earlier confidence. "He told me you two were already separated and the divorce was just a formality." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but finding only genuine distress. "How long has this been going on?" 8 months, she admitted. "We met at a regional insurance conference in Seattle. He pursued me, said his marriage was over in all but paperwork." 8 months. While I was working night shifts at the hospital, often too exhausted to question his late meetings and weekend conferences, Ryan had been methodically constructing a parallel life with this woman. "Did you look up Oregon property records before making an offer on the house?" I asked, genuinely curious about how deep her due diligence had gone. She shook her head. "Ryan handled everything. He said it was easier since he's in the industry and knows the system." She looked down at her hands. "I feel like such a fool." "That makes 2 of us," I replied, surprised to feel a flicker of empathy beneath my anger. We had both been manipulated, albeit in different ways. Ryan, hearing our conversation, attempted to regain control. "Jessica, don't listen to her. Lauren has always been jealous and controlling. This is just her way of trying to keep me from moving on." The desperation in his voice was palpable now. I recognized the tactic: create doubt, turn the tables, make me sound irrational. It might have worked before when I was unsure of what I was seeing. Not today. "Ryan," I said calmly, "the mortgage fraud is documented. The financial records are clear. There are witnesses to your statements and electronic trails of everything. This isn't about jealousy. It's about crimes you've committed." His expression darkened. "You'll regret this, Lauren. When this is over, you'll have nothing." Jake stepped closer to me, a physical reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. "I think you're confusing your situation with hers," he said quietly. When the credit union officials returned, their expressions were grave. "We've reviewed the preliminary evidence," the legal representative stated, "and we're contacting law enforcement regarding potential mortgage fraud. We'll need statements from all parties involved." Ryan's face contorted with rage and panic. "This is ridiculous. Lauren agreed to this arrangement. She's just trying to back out now because she's jealous." The supervisor regarded him coolly. "Mr. Thompson, I suggest you consult with an attorney before making any further statements. Mortgage fraud is a federal offense." As if on cue, the credit union doors opened and 2 police officers entered, responding to the call from the credit union's security team. Ryan's bravado finally collapsed completely as he realized the severity of his situation. The rest of the morning proceeded with formal statements, evidence collection, and preliminary police reports. I answered questions calmly and precisely, presenting the documentation I had gathered and explaining the timeline of my discoveries. Ryan was taken to a separate room for questioning, his protestations of innocence growing increasingly desperate as the evidence mounted against him. Jessica, after giving her statement, approached me as I was preparing to leave. "I'm sorry," she said simply. I considered for a moment, then shook my head. "No. In fact, it might be better this way. They both get to hear the truth at once." As we walked toward the building, I felt strangely calm. The weeks of shock, hurt, and disbelief had crystallized into something harder and more focused. a determination to reclaim my life and my financial security from the man who had so callously betrayed both. Through the credit union's glass doors, I could see Ryan and Jessica sitting together in the lobby, heads bent close as they reviewed documents. Ryan was pointing to something on the page, Jessica nodding with a smile I now recognized as more than professional satisfaction. They looked like what they were, a couple planning their future together, using my name and my money to make it happen. Jake squeezed my shoulder. "Remember, I'm right here. If things get difficult, just say the word and we're out." I nodded, took a deep breath, and pushed open the door to confront the architects of my betrayal and begin the process of reclaiming my life. The moment Ryan spotted me walking into the credit union with Jake beside me, his expression transformed from relaxed confidence to barely concealed panic. He quickly whispered something to Jessica before standing to greet me, his customer service smile firmly in place but not quite reaching his eyes. "Lauren, you brought company," he said, glancing nervously at Jake's imposing figure. "This is Jake, Megan's husband," I explained calmly. "He's here to help me understand some concerning elements of this mortgage application." Valerie Martin approached with professional warmth. "Mrs. Thompson, glad to see you again. And Mr. Thompson, good to meet you in person finally. Shall we proceed to the conference room? Everything is ready for the final signatures." "Perfect," I replied before Ryan could speak. "I have a few questions about the paperwork first." Ryan stepped closer, placing his hand on my arm in what might appear affectionate to observers, but felt like a restraining gesture. "Honey, I've reviewed everything already. It's all standard language." I gently removed his hand. "Yes, you certainly have reviewed everything, including signing my name multiple times, apparently." His face paled slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Let's talk about this privately," he murmured, trying to guide me away from Jessica, who was watching our interaction with growing concern. "I believe privacy is the last thing this situation needs," I replied, loud enough for both Jessica and Valerie to hear. "In fact, transparency is exactly what's required here." Valerie looked between us, sensing the tension. "Perhaps you'd like a moment before we proceed with the paperwork?" "Actually," I said, opening my purse and removing the folder I'd prepared, "I'd like to discuss the validity of the application itself." I turned to face Valerie directly, specifically the fact that my signatures on this mortgage application are forgeries. The professional atmosphere in the room shattered. Jessica stood abruptly, her eyes darting between Ryan and me. Ryan stepped forward, his voice low and urgent. "Lauren, you're confused. We discussed this mortgage weeks ago. Remember? After my promotion?" "That's interesting," I replied, maintaining my composure despite my pounding heart. "Especially since you haven't received a promotion, and we've never once discussed purchasing a home in Westlake. Perhaps you're confusing me with someone else." I glanced meaningfully at Jessica. "Mrs. Thompson," Valerie interjected, clearly uncomfortable. "Are you saying you didn't authorize this mortgage application?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." I opened the folder and removed copies of the documents I'd photographed yesterday, pointing to several signatures. "These are not my signatures. I never saw these documents until yesterday, when I came in specifically to investigate what appeared to be fraud." Valerie's professional demeanor gave way to alarm. "This is a very serious allegation." "One I can prove," I assured her, removing more documents from my folder. "I've brought samples of my actual signature from legal documents and notarized papers spanning several years. I've also consulted with a lawyer who specializes in financial fraud." Ryan's facade finally cracked. "Lauren, stop this right now. You're embarrassing yourself." "I think we both know who should be embarrassed here, Ryan." I turned to Jessica, who had gone completely still, watching the unfolding drama with wide eyes. "Did you know about this? Did you know he was forging my signature to secure a mortgage for your dream home?" Or did he tell you I had agreed to this arrangement?" Jessica looked at Ryan, confusion and betrayal dawning on her face. "You said, your wife knew about us. You said she had agreed to an amicable divorce and was supportive of your fresh start." I laughed without humor. "Is that what he told you? While he was systematically draining our joint savings for your down payment?" "I didn't know," Jessica whispered, her confident demeanor crumbling. "Ryan told me the down payment came from his personal savings and a bonus. He said you had separate finances." Valerie, now fully alert to the seriousness of the situation, intervened. "I think we need to pause this process immediately. If there's any question about the authenticity of signatures or the legitimacy of the application, we cannot proceed." Ryan's expression hardened as he realized the situation was spiraling beyond his control. "This is a misunderstanding. I believed what I wanted to believe, but I should have asked more questions." I nodded, too emotionally drained for further conversation. "Take care of yourself, Jessica. And maybe do a background check next time." Outside, Megan was waiting, by her car as planned. She embraced me tightly as I approached. "Is it done?" "Phase 1 is done," I confirmed, the emotional weight of the morning finally catching up with me. "Ryan is being questioned by police. The credit union is investigating the fraud. And I think his girlfriend just realized what kind of man she's been involved with." "What happens now?" Megan asked as we drove away from the credit union. "Now I follow through with the divorce proceedings," I replied, staring out the window at the Portland skyline. "Sarah says the evidence of financial fraud strengthens my position significantly, and I need to find a new place to live." The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving me hollow and exhausted. The life I had built with Ryan, or thought I had built, was irrevocably shattered. The future I had planned no longer existed. In its place stretched an uncertain landscape I would have to navigate alone. Back at the house, Jake helped secure the premises, changing locks and checking security, while Megan and I packed more of my essentials. Ryan wouldn't be coming home immediately. The police questioning would take hours at minimum. But I had no intention of being there when he was released. "You'll stay with us in Seattle until you decide what's next," Megan insisted, not a question, but a statement of fact. "The hospital will understand a brief leave of absence given the circumstances." I nodded, too tired to argue and grateful for the safety net my sister provided. As we worked, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Ryan's family and our mutual friends, apparently already alerted to the situation through Ryan's one permitted phone call. I silenced the notifications, unwilling to engage with the flood of questions and accusations until I had regained my emotional equilibrium. By mid-afternoon, we had packed my car with clothing, personal mementos, important documents, and a few essential household items I wasn't willing to leave behind. The rest could wait for a more organized move once the legal situation stabilized. As I took one final walk through the house that had been my home for the past 4 years, memories surfaced unbidden. Ryan carrying me across the threshold after we signed the lease, Sunday mornings making pancakes in the kitchen, quiet evenings reading together in the living room, planning our future in the small office we'd designated as a potential nursery, someday. Had any of it been real? Or had I been living in a carefully constructed fiction all along, projecting my own hopes and values onto a man who never truly shared them? In the bedroom, I paused at our wedding photo on the dresser, smiling faces, hopeful eyes, hands clasped in promise. I left it there, face down. Whatever that day had meant to me, it clearly hadn't held the same significance for Ryan. Just as we were preparing to leave, my phone rang with a call from Sarah Jameson. "Lauren, I've been updated on what happened at the credit union." She began without preamble. "You handled it exactly right. The police want to interview you more formally tomorrow. I'll accompany you for that." Is Ryan being charged? I asked. Not yet, but it's likely. Forgery and attempted mortgage fraud are just the beginning. As we dig deeper into the financial records, we may find more irregularities. What about the money he's already taken? Can I get that back? Sarah hesitated. Some of it, potentially. We're filing emergency motions to freeze remaining assets and to initiate formal discovery. But financial recovery can be complicated, especially if funds have already been spent. After finishing the call, I joined Megan and Jake in the driveway, ready for the 3-hour drive to Seattle and the temporary sanctuary it offered. As we pulled away from the curb, I resisted the urge to look back at the house. That chapter was closed. Halfway to Seattle, stopped at a roadside diner for a late lunch I couldn't taste. My phone rang again. An unfamiliar number with a Portland area code. Against my better judgment, I answered. Lauren, it's Jessica Reynolds. Her voice sounded strained, almost unrecognizable from the confident woman I'd first encountered in Ryan's office. How did you get this number? I asked, stepping outside. The diner for privacy. Ryan's phone. I thought you should know. After the police released him, he tried to access your joint accounts. When he couldn't, I guess you must have frozen them, he became volatile. A chill ran through me despite the warm spring afternoon. What do you mean, volatile? He came to my apartment demanding money. Said I owed him after what happened. Today. When I refused, he threatened to tell my company I was involved in the fraud. He's not rational, Lauren. I've never seen him like this. I processed this information, recognizing the desperation of a man whose carefully constructed plans had collapsed. Did you call the police? Yes, they took him away about an hour ago. But I thought you should know. He kept saying he was going to make you pay for ruining everything. I thanked her for the warning, ended the call, and immediately contacted Sarah to update her on this development. She promised to seek a restraining order immediately and to alert the detective handling the fraud investigation about Ryan's behavior. When I returned to the table, Megan took one look at my face and demanded to know what had happened. I shared Jessica's warning, watching my sister's expression harden. You're definitely staying with us, she stated firmly. At least until this situation stabilizes. Jake's cousin is a Seattle police officer. We'll make sure they're aware of potential issues. The protective determination in her voice nearly undid me. After weeks of isolation, carefully guarding my discoveries while navigating Ryan's deceptions, having allies who unquestionably had my back felt like a life raft in turbulent waters. The remainder of the drive passed in contemplative silence. I stared out the window as the landscape transformed from Oregon's valleys to Washington's forests, each mile creating physical distance from the wreckage of my marriage. My mind kept returning to the moment in the credit union when reality had finally shattered for Ryan, when he realized his elaborate house of cards was collapsing. The naked panic in his eyes had revealed something crucial. He had never expected to be caught. The confidence with which he had conducted his deception suggested a pattern of behavior rather than an isolated moral failure. I wondered how many other lies I had unwittingly accepted over our years together. How many business trips had been rendezvous with Jessica, or perhaps others before her. As we crossed the Seattle city limits, my phone buzzed with an email from Sarah with the subject line, "Emergency Protective Order Granted." The attached document confirmed that Ryan was legally prohibited from contacting me or coming within 300 feet of my person, residence, or workplace. It was a necessary precaution, but seeing it in official legal language, my name and Ryan's separated by court orders and prohibitions, drove home the finality of our separation in a way even the confrontation at the credit union hadn't quite managed. Megan and Jake lived in a cozy 3-bedroom house in Seattle's Green Lake neighborhood, with a spare room they had already prepared for my arrival. The simple kindness of fresh sheets on the bed and towels laid out in the adjacent bathroom brought tears to my eyes. The first I had allowed myself to shed since discovering Ryan's betrayal. "Let it out," Megan said simply, sitting beside me on the bed and wrapping her arm around my shoulders. "You've been so strong through all of this. It's okay to break a little now." And finally, in the safety of my sister's home, surrounded by people who loved me unconditionally, I allowed myself to feel the full magnitude of what had happened. Not just the practical implications of financial fraud and divorce proceedings, but the profound personal betrayal by the person I had trusted most in the world. I cried for the marriage I had believed in, for the future we had planned together, for the children we had talked about having when the time was right. I cried for my own blindness, for the red flags I had missed or explained away. Mostly, I cried for the person I had been just weeks ago, trusting, hopeful, building a life on what turned out to be quicksand. Megan held me through it all, not offering platitudes or false reassurances, just steady presence and unwavering support. When the storm of emotion finally passed, leaving me drained but somehow lighter, she brought me tea and sat cross-legged on the bed facing me. "You know what Dad would say right now, don't you?" she asked, a gentle smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I laughed shakily. "Probably something about how Thompson women don't stay down when life knocks them over." "Exactly. You can wallow or you can rebuild, but you can't do both," she quoted our father's favorite saying. "So tomorrow we wallow a bit more if needed, but the day after, we start rebuilding." The next morning, I woke disoriented in the unfamiliar room, momentarily confused by the absence of Ryan's steady breathing beside me. Reality rushed back quickly. The confrontation at the credit union, the police involvement, the drive to Seattle. I checked my phone to find 17 missed calls and numerous text messages, most from Ryan's family and friends demanding explanations or offering unsolicited advice. Among them was a single text from Ryan himself, sent at 3:47 a.m. "This isn't over. You've destroyed everything I worked for." I immediately forwarded the message to Sarah, noting the violation of the protective order, then blocked his number. Whatever came next between us would be handled through attorneys, not direct communication. Sarah called moments later. "I've reported the violation to the court and the detective handling your case," she assured me. "His bail conditions have already been revised to include electronic monitoring. If he attempts to contact you again or come near you, he'll be immediately returned to custody." The knowledge that the legal system was functioning as it should provided some comfort, but I knew better than to rely on protective orders alone. Ryan's threatening behavior suggested a desperation that might override rational calculations about consequences. Later that morning, Sarah and I conducted a video call with Detective Morales, the Portland police officer investigating the mortgage fraud. I walked through my discoveries chronologically, from the initial suspicions raised by finding Jessica in Ryan's office to the trail of financial evidence and the forged signatures on the mortgage application. "This is one of the more thoroughly documented cases of financial fraud I've seen from a civilian," Detective Morales commented, sounding impressed. "Most victims don't manage to compile such comprehensive evidence before confronting the perpetrator." "I work in emergency medicine," I explained. "Methodical assessment before action becomes second nature." "Well, it's paying off here. The district attorney is reviewing the case for formal charges. In addition to the mortgage fraud, we're investigating the unauthorized transfers from your joint accounts. Those may constitute theft or conversion of assets, depending on various factors." After the interview concluded, Sarah remained on the line to discuss next steps in the divorce proceedings. "With the evidence of financial misconduct, we're in a strong position to argue for an unequal division of remaining assets in your favor," she explained. "I've also filed motions for temporary spousal support given the financial strain his actions have created." "What about the house we were renting?" "I can't return there, but I also can't afford to pay rent on a new place and maintain payments on the current lease." "We'll address that in the temporary orders hearing next week. Given the protective order and the circumstances, the court should allow you to break the lease without penalty. Your testimony about Ryan's threats will be crucial there. The conversation left me with a clearer understanding of the legal path forward, but also a heightened awareness of how dramatically my financial situation had changed. The savings I had carefully built over years of frugal living had been decimated. My portion of the remaining joint assets would provide some cushion, but rebuilding financial security would be a long process. That afternoon, I received an unexpected email from my supervisor at the Portland hospital. The subject line read simply, "Take the time you need." The body of the message was brief, but supportive. "Lauren, Diane mentioned you're dealing with serious personal issues. Your position is secure, and we can discuss flexible arrangements when you're ready to return. Portland isn't your only option. We have sister facilities in Seattle if relocation would help. Let me know what you need." The message brought fresh tears, this time of gratitude rather than grief. In the midst of personal chaos, the reminder that I had professional value and workplace support was profoundly reassuring. Over the next several days, I established a temporary rhythm in Seattle. Mornings were dedicated to practical matters, video, calls with Sarah, documenting financial records, researching apartments in both Portland and Seattle, and gradually notifying trusted friends of my situation. Afternoons often found me walking around Green Lake, the repetitive motion and fresh air helping to clear my mind and process the ongoing emotional aftershocks. 1 week after the confrontation at the credit union, formal charges were filed against Ryan, forgery, attempted mortgage fraud, and misappropriation of joint funds. His attorney immediately proposed a plea arrangement that would minimize jail time in exchange for financial restitution. "It's a start," Sarah told me when she called with the news. "But we're pushing for full accounting of all misappropriated funds, plus damages for the impact on your credit and financial security." That same day, I received another unexpected communication, an email from Jessica Reynolds with the subject line, "Information you should have." "Lauren," she wrote, "after everything that's happened, I've been doing a lot of soul-searching about my role in this situation. While I truly didn't know about the financial fraud, I should have questioned Ryan's stories more thoroughly. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm attaching emails and text messages between Ryan and me that might be relevant to your legal proceedings. They include discussions about financial matters that contradicted what he was telling you. I've already provided these to Detective Morales, but thought you should have them directly as well. I'm deeply sorry for the pain this situation has caused you." The attached messages confirmed what I had already suspected. Ryan had been systematically lying to both Jessica and me, creating separate narratives tailored to what each of us wanted to hear. To Jessica, he portrayed himself as financially independent, claiming the money for the house came from his personal success. To me, he had maintained the facade of dedicated husband while systematically dismantling our financial security. Most illuminating were the timestamps on the messages, many sent during evenings when he was supposedly working late or during business trips I had never questioned. The extent of the deception was breathtaking in its detail and duration. I forwarded the messages to Sarah, who responded immediately. "This strengthens our case significantly. The premeditation evident in these communications will be compelling." To the court. 2 weeks into my stay in Seattle, I made a decision that surprised even me. I scheduled an interview with the HR department at Seattle Grace, the sister hospital to my Portland workplace. The position was similar to my role in Portland, but with potential for advancement into trauma coordination, a specialization I had always been interested in pursuing. "Are you sure about this?" Megan asked when I told her about the interview. "Portland is your home." It was, I acknowledged. "But right now, Portland represents everything I've lost. Seattle could be a fresh start, new job, new apartment, new chapter, and having family nearby wouldn't hurt during the rebuilding process." The interview went surprisingly well. My professional reputation had preceded me, with glowing recommendations from my Portland supervisors. By the end of the conversation, I had a formal offer for a position with a slight salary increase and a clear path to the trauma coordination role within 18 months. Accepting the position felt like the first concrete step toward rebuilding my life on my own terms, a professional decision made without reference to Ryan's needs or preferences, based solely on my own career goals and well-being. That evening, gathering my courage, I finally returned some of the calls from friends I had been avoiding since the confrontation. The conversations were difficult but necessary, as I provided carefully edited versions of what had happened, emphasizing the facts without delving into the most painful emotional details. Most were supportive, expressing shock at Ryan's actions and offering whatever help they could provide. A few, primarily Ryan's friends from before our marriage, were skeptical or defensive, suggesting there must be another side to the story. I let those relationships go without argument, recognizing that some bridges could not and should not be repaired. 3 weeks after fleeing Portland, I returned briefly for the temporary orders hearing in our divorce proceedings. Sarah had arranged for additional security given Ryan's previous threats, and the courthouse staff ensured we entered through separate doors and remained in different waiting areas before the hearing. When I finally saw Ryan in the courtroom, I was shocked by the change in his appearance. The confident, polished insurance executive had been replaced by someone who looked simultaneously diminished and dangerous. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, with a coiled tension evident in his posture. Throughout the hearing, he alternated between staring at me with naked hostility and avoiding eye contact entirely, whispering furiously to his attorney during my testimony about the financial deception and his subsequent threatening behavior. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, listened carefully to evidence from both sides before issuing temporary orders that largely favored my position. Continued enforcement of the protective order, temporary spousal support to replace the savings Ryan had depleted, permission to break our rental lease without penalty, and freezing of remaining joint assets pending final property division. As the hearing concluded, Ryan suddenly stood, ignoring his attorney's restraining hand on his arm. "This is a setup," he announced loudly. "She planned this whole thing to ruin me professionally. She's vindictive and unstable." The judge's gavel came down sharply. "Mr. Thompson, control yourself or I will hold you in contempt. These outbursts do nothing to help your case." Ryan subsided, but not before fixing me with a look of such pure hatred that it confirmed every precaution we had taken. This was not a man who accepted responsibility for his actions. This was someone who blamed others for the consequences of his own choices, a dangerous combination of entitlement and rage. Outside the courthouse, safely escorted to Sarah's car by security personnel, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge a difficult truth. I was afraid of the man I had once loved enough to marry. Not just concerned or wary, but genuinely frightened of what he might do as the full legal and financial consequences of his actions unfolded. "We'll maintain the highest level of security throughout the proceedings," Sarah assured me, reading my expression accurately. "And we'll push for the maximum protection in the final divorce decree." On the drive back to Seattle that evening, watching the familiar Oregon landscape give way to Washington's terrain, I felt a complicated mixture of emotions: lingering fear from the courthouse confrontation, grief for the marriage I had believed in, anxiety about the uncertain path ahead, but also, underneath it all, a quiet determination that had been building since that first moment in the credit union. Ryan had systematically dismantled our shared life, stolen our financial security, and threatened my safety when his deception was exposed. But he hadn't broken my fundamental sense of self. The skills that had made me a successful emergency nurse, careful observation, methodical assessment, decisive action under pressure, had served me well in this personal crisis. Those same skills would guide the rebuilding process. That night, in the safety of Megan's guest room, I began researching apartments near Seattle Grace Hospital. Not temporary accommodations, but a place I could gradually transform into a home. Modest, but with good natural light. Close to work, but also to green spaces for morning runs. A fresh start. As I scrolled through listings, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Final plea deal accepted. Ryan pleads guilty to reduced charges in exchange for full financial restitution and no contact order. Sentencing next month, expecting probation and community service. Details tomorrow. The news wasn't entirely surprising. First-time white-collar offenders rarely faced significant jail time, but the confirmation that Ryan would remain free intensified my resolve to build a new life far from Portland. The T. Physical distance wouldn't eliminate risk entirely, but it would provide an additional layer of security while I reconstructed my life on different foundations. I selected 3 promising apartments to tour the following day, each representing a potential new beginning. The savings Ryan hadn't managed to access would cover security deposits and essential furnishings. The new job offered financial stability and professional growth. Megan and Jake provided temporary sanctuary and ongoing support. It wasn't the life I had planned or expected. The future I had envisioned with Ryan, the children we had talked about having, the retirement we had started saving for, the growing old together, had evaporated like morning mist. In its place stood something, less defined but entirely mine to shape. As I closed my laptop and prepared for sleep, my gaze fell on the small stack of personal items I'd brought from Portland. Photo albums, a quilt my grandmother had made, a few cherished books. These tangible connections to my past reminded me that while Ryan had taken much, he hadn't taken everything. The core of who I was remained intact, ready to form the foundation of whatever came next. Tomorrow would bring apartment viewings, paperwork for the new job, and another consultation with Sarah about the ongoing divorce proceedings. Small steps on a longer journey of reconstruction. Not the journey I would have chosen, but one I was increasingly determined to navigate with the same strength and methodical care that had carried me through the initial crisis. Ryan had spent our savings on his mistress and forged my name on their mortgage documents. That was a fact I couldn't change. But what happened next, how I responded, rebuilt, and ultimately thrived, that story remained unwritten, the pen firmly in my hand. 6 months into my new life in Seattle, I found myself standing in the downtown courthouse, preparing to finalize my divorce from Ryan. My attorney Sarah had made the trip from Portland, bringing with her the last of the paperwork needed to legally sever the connection to the man who had systematically betrayed me. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked, her expression professionally neutral but her eyes kind. We had developed a solid working relationship over these difficult months, her steady guidance helping me navigate the complex legal and emotional terrain of unraveling a marriage destroyed by deception. "More than ready," I replied, smoothing the jacket of the charcoal gray suit I'd chosen for the occasion, an outfit that made me feel armored and confident. "Let's finish this." The courtroom was nearly empty, just a few lawyers and court officials moving efficiently through their day. Ryan had waived his right to appear for the final proceedings, his absence part of the negotiated settlement. His legal troubles extended well beyond our divorce now. The mortgage fraud investigation had uncovered additional financial improprieties at his insurance agency, triggering audits and potential charges from regulatory authorities. Judge Wilson, a silver-haired man with reading glasses perched low on his nose, reviewed our settlement agreement with practiced efficiency. "Ms. Thompson, you understand the terms of this agreement? You're waiving further claims against Mr. Thompson's future earnings in exchange for the lump sum restitution and the favorable asset division?" "Yes, Your Honor," I answered clearly. "I understand completely." What I understood, beyond the legal language, was that the settlement represented the best possible outcome from a terrible situation. Ryan's crimes had cost him his professional reputation, his position at the agency, and much of his future earning potential. The restitution ordered by the criminal court covered most, though not all, of what he had taken from our joint accounts. The divorce settlement granted me our remaining assets, including my retirement accounts he hadn't been able to access. Most importantly, it offered a clean break. No ongoing financial entanglements, no alimony either direction, no reason for future contact. Judge Wilson signed the decree with a flourish. Divorce is granted, settlement approved as fair and equitable. Ms. Thompson, you are hereby restored to your maiden name of Lauren Garfield, as requested. He looked up, his expression softening slightly. Good luck to you. Just like that, it was over. 6 years of marriage dissolved in a 15-minute hearing. I felt lighter walking out of the courtroom, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying for months. Sarah and I shook hands on the courthouse steps, professional formalities giving way to a brief, genuine hug. Take care of yourself, Lauren, she said. Though based on how you've handled everything, I have no doubt you will. Thank you for everything, I replied, meaning it deeply. Her guidance had been instrumental in achieving this outcome. I couldn't have navigated this without you. As Sarah headed to the airport for her flight back to Portland, I walked toward Pike Place Market, allowing myself to feel the significance of the moment. Legally, financially, and emotionally, I was no longer connected to Ryan Thompson. I was Lauren Garfield again, not returning to who I had been before the marriage, but reclaiming my name as part of creating something new. I found a small cafe overlooking Elliott Bay, ordered a latte, and called my sister to share the news. It's official, I told Megan when she answered. Signed, sealed, delivered. I'm divorced. How does it feel? She asked. The background, noise suggesting she was at the elementary school where she taught. I considered the question seriously. Like closing a book I never want to read again. Necessary, final. I paused, watching ferries cross the bay. And surprisingly okay. I'm proud of you, Laure. Not everyone comes through something like this stronger. You should celebrate tonight. Actually, I have plans, I replied, smiling slightly. Dinner, with Dr. Chen to discuss the trauma coordination proposal. Megan's tone turned teasing. The handsome Dr. Chen who just happens to have asked you to coffee 3 times in the past month? That purely professional dinner? I felt a flush rise to my cheeks, grateful she couldn't see it. It's about the hospital initiative, really. And the fact that he's intelligent, successful, and looks like he stepped out of a medical drama has nothing to do with you choosing today of all days for this dinner? There was some truth to her teasing that I wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. James Chen, the head of emergency services at Seattle Grace, had been supportive of my transition to the hospital, becoming both a professional mentor and, increasingly, a friend. The coffee invitations had indeed been becoming more frequent, and there was an undeniable chemistry I'd been hesitant to explore while still legally married. One step at a time, Meg, I replied, neither confirming nor denying her implications. Professional dinner first. Today is about closing one chapter, not rushing into another. After ending the call, I lingered at the cafe, allowing myself the luxury of reflection. The 6 months since fleeing Portland had been challenging but transformative. The new job at Seattle Grace had provided not just financial stability, but a sense of purpose and community. My small one-bedroom apartment near Green Lake had gradually become a true home, furnished simply but thoughtfully with items chosen solely for my own taste and comfort. Most significantly, the crisis had revealed strengths I hadn't fully recognized. In myself, resilience, clarity under pressure, the capacity to rebuild after devastation. The methodical approach that made me effective in emergency medicine had served me equally well in reconstructing my personal life. That evening, I met James at Altura, an upscale Italian restaurant he'd chosen for our discussion about implementing a new trauma response protocol. He was already seated when I arrived, rising politely as I approached the table. "Lauren." He greeted me warmly, his smile genuine. At 42, James had an established career and a quiet confidence I found appealing. "You look lovely." "Thank you," I replied, settling into my chair. "It's been a significant day." His expression turned curious. "Oh?" I hadn't planned to mention the divorce finalization, wanting to keep the dinner focused on professional matters, but found myself sharing anyway. My divorce was finalized this morning. Officially Lauren Garfield again. James's dark eyes held mine for a moment. "Congratulations seems inappropriate, but I'm glad you've reached resolution." "Thank you. It feels right to close that chapter definitively." I opened the menu, signaling a shift to lighter topics. Now, about the trauma response protocol. The dinner progressed easily, our discussion of hospital procedures interspersed with more personal conversation. James shared stories of his Taiwanese parents' initial disappointment when he chose emergency medicine over their preferred specialty of cardiology. I talked about growing up with Megan in our small Ohio hometown and my journey to emergency nursing. "You know," James said as we lingered over dessert, "I've been wanting to ask you something for a while now." The slight hesitation in his voice, so unlike his usual confident manner, sent a flutter of anticipation through me. "The Seattle Symphony is performing Dvořák next weekend," he continued. "I have tickets, and I'd very much like you to join me. Not as colleagues discussing hospital business, but as..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "A proper date." The invitation hung between us, his expression open and slightly vulnerable. 6 months ago, fresh from the devastation of Ryan's betrayal, I would have declined automatically, too raw to consider any new connection. Now, sitting across from this thoughtful, intelligent man who had never been anything but respectful and supportive, the prospect felt not frightening, but hopeful. "I'd like that," I answered simply. James's smile broadened. "Good. That's good." As we walked to the parking garage after dinner, our conversation lighter after clearing that hurdle, James suddenly grew serious again. "Lauren, I want you to know that I understand you've been through something difficult. I don't expect..." I touched his arm lightly, stopping his careful disclaimer. "James, I appreciate your sensitivity, but I've learned that looking backward, too much prevents moving forward. I'm not rushing into anything, but I'm not afraid of new possibilities either." His expression warmed with understanding. "Fair enough. One symphony at a time, then." Walking to my car, I felt a quiet sense of rightness settle over me. The timing of this first tentative step toward a new relationship, coming on the very day my divorce became final, seemed symbolic in the best possible way. Not a desperate rebound or an attempt to fill a void, but a measured choice to remain, open to life's possibilities. The following week brought another significant milestone, the completion of my first major project at Seattle Grace. The trauma coordination initiative I'd developed had been approved with funding, representing both professional achievement and personal validation. When James called to congratulate me, his voice warm with genuine pride in my accomplishment, I allowed myself to acknowledge the growing connection between us. The symphony date that weekend was lovely in its simplicity. Beautiful music, engaging conversation, the gentle exploration of compatibility without pressure or urgency. When James walked me to my door afterward, his goodnight kiss was brief but promising, carrying respect for boundaries alongside clear interest in deepening our connection. "I had a wonderful evening," he said, stepping back rather than presuming further intimacy. "So did I," replied honestly. "Thank you for introducing me to Dvořák Beyond the New World Symphony. There's a chamber music series starting next month," he offered. "If you're interested?" The tentative question in his voice made me smile. "I'd like that very much." As autumn progressed into winter, James and I developed a rhythm of regular dates interspersed with professional collaboration at the hospital. We attended concerts, explored Seattle's restaurants, and spent weekend afternoons walking around Green Lake, getting to know each other with the patience of people who understood the value of building something solid. What I appreciated most about James was his complete comfort with my independence. Unlike Ryan, who had gradually inserted himself into every aspect of my life while maintaining his secret parallel existence, James respected boundaries and celebrated my accomplishments without insecurity. He understood when work demanded my full attention and never made me feel guilty for prioritizing my career or time with Megan and her family. In late November, nearly 7 months after my confrontation with Ryan at the credit union, I received an unexpected email from Jessica Reynolds, his former mistress and unwitting accomplice in the mortgage fraud. "Lauren," she wrote, "I hope this message finds you well. I'm relocating to Chicago next month for a fresh start and wanted to reach out before leaving the Northwest. The events of last spring have prompted significant soul-searching and therapy on my part. While I know my actions hurt you deeply, regardless of my knowledge about the financial fraud, I've been working to understand the patterns that led me to that situation. If you're open to it, I'd appreciate the opportunity to apologize in person before I leave. I completely understand if you prefer not to meet." I stared at the message for a long time, uncertain how to respond. Jessica represented a painful chapter I had worked hard to close. Yet there was something about her request that resonated with my own journey of rebuilding and reflection. After careful consideration, I replied, agreeing to meet at a neutral coffee shop near Pike Place Market. Public enough to feel safe, but quiet enough for a potentially difficult conversation. She was already seated when I arrived, her appearance markedly different from the polished, confident woman I'd first encountered in Ryan's office. Her hair was shorter, her makeup minimal, her expensive style replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. She stood when she saw me, her expression a mixture of nervousness and resolve. "Thank you for coming," she said, as I sat across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted. "But there's value in closure." Jessica nodded, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. "I've been in therapy since everything happened," she began, working to understand why I accepted Ryan's story so readily, why I didn't question the inconsistencies that should have been obvious. "And have you found answers?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. "Some," she acknowledged. "I've recognized patterns in my relationships, being drawn to unavailable men, accepting complexity that masks deception, mistaking intensity for depth." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "None of which excuses my involvement in what happened to you. I wasn't innocent, Lauren. Even without knowing about the financial fraud, I chose to be involved with a married man. I accepted his narrative because it was convenient for what I wanted. Her honesty was unexpected and disarming." "Why tell me this now?" "Because I'm trying to build a life based on greater integrity," she replied simply. "That means acknowledging harm I've caused, even unintentionally. You deserved better than what happened, and I played a role in that, however unwittingly." We talked for nearly an hour, our conversation evolving from the initial awkwardness into something surprisingly genuine. Jessica shared that the mortgage fraud investigation had impacted her professionally as well, requiring her to fight to clear her name with industry regulators despite her cooperation with authorities. Ryan's deception had damaged both our lives, albeit in very different ways. "Have you heard anything about him recently?" I asked, realizing I hadn't thought about Ryan in weeks. Jessica shook her head. "Not directly. I've blocked all contact. But through industry connections, I heard he took a position with a small agency in Boise. Apparently, the legal issues limited his options significantly." As we prepared to leave, Jessica hesitated, then reached into her bag and removed a small envelope. "This probably doesn't mean much, but She handed it to me. It's a portion of my savings, equal to what I understood was spent on deposits and preparations for the house. It's not everything Ryan took from you, but it's what I can do to address my part in this. I was stunned by the gesture, staring at the envelope containing a cashier's check. Jessica, this isn't necessary. You were deceived too. Not to the same degree, she insisted. And restitution isn't just about necessity. It's about acknowledging responsibility and trying to right wrongs where possible. Please accept it, if not for financial reasons, then as a symbol of my genuine regret. Eventually, I accepted the check, recognizing that her need to make amends was as genuine as my initial need for justice had been. As we parted ways outside the coffee shop, I felt another piece of the past settling into proper perspective. Not forgotten, but no longer carrying the emotional charge it once had. That evening, I deposited Jessica's check and then made a donation of the same amount to a nonprofit supporting financial literacy for women leaving abusive relationships. The symmetry felt right, transforming one chapter of financial deception into resources that might help others avoid similar situations. When I shared the encounter with James over dinner later that week, his response reflected the thoughtful perspective I'd come to value in him. That took courage on both your parts, he observed. Her to seek amends, you to be open to hearing her. It was surprisingly healing, I admitted. Not just her apology, but seeing how she's working to understand her own patterns. It made me reflect on my own journey since everything happened. James reached across the table, taking my hand gently. And what have you discovered on that journey? I considered the question seriously. That resilience isn't just about surviving difficulty. It's about growing through it. I'm stronger now, more aware of my own boundaries and values, more intentional about the life I'm building. I met his gaze directly, and more appreciative of authentic connection when I find it. The warmth in his eyes deepened. I'm grateful to be part of that journey, Lauren. However it continues to unfold. As winter settled over Seattle, bringing holiday lights and festive gatherings, I reflected on how dramatically my life had transformed in just 9 months. The devastating discovery of Ryan's betrayal had initiated a period of profound change: career, transition, relocation, financial rebuilding, and emotional recovery. What had begun as crisis response had evolved into intentional reconstruction, each decision carrying me further from the wreckage and toward a life that felt increasingly authentic and satisfying. My professional standing at Seattle Grace continued to strengthen. The Trauma Coordination Initiative had proven so successful that administration approved expanding it to other departments, with me leading the implementation team. Colleagues who had initially been skeptical of the new transfer from Portland now sought my input on protocols and procedures, recognizing the value of my experience and methodical approach. My personal life had found a new equilibrium as well. The tentative connection with James had deepened gradually into a relationship built on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine compatibility. Unlike my whirlwind courtship with Ryan, which had progressed from first date to engagement in just 6 months, James and I moved at a measured pace, each step forward the result of careful consideration rather than emotional impulse. When he invited me to join his family for their traditional Christmas Eve dinner, I recognized the significance of the invitation, not just meeting his parents and siblings, but being included in their most meaningful annual gathering. "Are you sure?" I asked when he extended the invitation. "It seems like an important family tradition." "That's precisely why I want you there," he replied, his expression conveying what his careful words didn't quite say, that he saw potential for a shared future, that my presence in his life had become important enough to integrate into his most treasured connections. The evening itself was lovely. James's parents, first-generation immigrants who had built successful medical careers while raising 3 children, welcomed me with genuine warmth. His siblings, both physicians themselves, shared embarrassing, stories from James's childhood with obvious affection. Through their interactions, I glimpsed the foundation of family values that had shaped the man I was coming to care for deeply. The emphasis on education and excellence balanced by profound connection and mutual support. Watching James laugh with his father, the similarity in their expressions striking despite the decades between them, I felt a quiet certainty settle in my chest. This was what healthy love looked like. Not the intoxicating, but ultimately hollow, connection I'd had with Ryan, but something steadier and more substantial, built on genuine knowing and acceptance. As midnight approached, James's mother pulled me aside, ostensibly to show me family photos, but clearly creating an opportunity for private conversation. "James tells us you've had a difficult year," she said, her accent more pronounced in the quiet moment. "Yes," I acknowledged simply, "but also a year of important growth." She nodded, studying my face with the perceptive gaze of someone who had overcome her own significant challenges. Sometimes life's hardest moments reveal our true strength. James has always been drawn to strength of character. She turned, a page in the photo album, revealing images of a young James in his medical school graduation regalia. He has not brought anyone to Christmas Eve dinner since Lisa died. The gentle reference to James's late wife, who had succumbed to cancer 4 years earlier, caught me off guard. He had told me about Lisa early in our relationship, sharing both the devastation of her illness and the gratitude for their time together, but rarely mentioned her in day-to-day conversation. "I'm honored to be included," I said sincerely. "James's mother patted my hand. He is careful with his heart, but I see how he looks at you. Like someone who has found something unexpected and precious." Later that night, driving back to my apartment through light snow, James was uncharacteristically quiet, his expression thoughtful. "Your family is wonderful," I offered, breaking the comfortable silence. "Thank you for including me." "They adored you," he replied, smiling briefly before returning to his contemplative mood. As we stopped at a traffic light, he turned to face me fully. "Lauren, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his tone sent a flicker of apprehension. Through me, memory of past betrayal briefly surfacing before I pushed it away. James was not Ryan. His integrity had been consistently demonstrated over months of knowing him. "I've been hesitant to express the depth of my feelings," he continued, his voice steady but vulnerable. "Partly out of respect for what you've been through, partly from my own caution after losing Lisa. But tonight, seeing you with my family, I realized I'm doing us both a disservice by holding back." He took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you, Lauren. Not impulsively or carelessly, but with full awareness of who you are, including the strengths your challenges have revealed." The light turned green, requiring his attention to return to driving, which gave me precious moments to process his words. The declaration wasn't entirely surprising. Our connection had been deepening steadily, but hearing it stated so directly brought both joy and lingering trepidation to the surface. By the time we reached my apartment, I had found my response. In the quiet space after he parked the car, I turned to face him. When Ryan's deception was revealed, I began carefully. I didn't just lose a husband. I lost trust in my own judgment, my ability to discern authentic connection from manipulation. Rebuilding that trust has been as important as rebuilding my finances or career. I reached for his hand, finding it warm and steady. "What you've shown me these past months, your consistency, your respect for boundaries, your celebration of my independence, has helped restore that faith in my own perceptions. And what I perceive, James, is that I'm falling in love with you too. Cautiously, yes, but genuinely." The smile that transformed his face held such honest joy that any lingering doubt dissolved. This was nothing like the calculated charm Ryan had deployed so effectively. This was authentic emotion, offered without expectation or manipulation. When James kissed me, it carried the weight of our shared declaration, tender but confident, a promise of continued care rather than possession. As snow fell gently around the car, creating a moment of perfect stillness, I recognized another milestone in my journey of reconstruction. Not just surviving betrayal, but finding the courage to trust again, to remain open to connection despite having experienced its darkest counterfeits. Inviting James up to my apartment that night represented another conscious choice, not an impulsive response to emotion, but a deliberate step toward deeper intimacy based on established trust and clear communication. Our lovemaking reflected the same careful attentiveness that characterized our relationship, each of us mindful of the other's responses, finding joy in mutual discovery. Later, lying in the quiet darkness with James's steady breathing beside me, I reflected on the extraordinary path that had led to this moment. The devastating discovery of Ryan's betrayal had initiated the most painful period of my life, stripping away financial security, marital stability, and basic trust in my own judgment. Yet that very devastation had ultimately created space for something more authentic to emerge, not just a healthier relationship, but a stronger sense of self. I had learned that recovery from betrayal wasn't just about healing wounds, but about reclaiming personal agency, making deliberate choices about career, location, relationships, and financial priorities based on my own values rather than accommodation or compromise. The methodical approach that made me effective in emergency medicine had served equally well in reconstructing my personal life, each decision building upon previous choices to create something that felt increasingly secure and authentic. As dawn light began filtering through the blinds, James stirred beside me, his arm tightening slightly around my waist as he drifted toward wakefulness. I watched his face in the soft light, marveling at how different this moment felt from similar mornings with Ryan. Not just the obvious distinction between genuine connection and hidden deception, but something more fundamental, the difference between a relationship that required performance and one that invited authentic presence. "Good morning," James murmured, his eyes opening to meet mine, his smile unguarded and warm. "Good morning," I replied, allowing myself to fully inhabit the moment, not anxiously anticipating future complications or dwelling on past betrayals, but simply appreciating the quiet intimacy of this new beginning. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same resilience and clarity that had carried me through the past difficult year. Ryan's betrayal had taken much from me: savings, security, innocence, but it had failed to destroy my capacity for joy or connection. That victory, more than any legal judgment or financial restitution, represented the most meaningful reclamation of all. As James and I shared coffee in my small kitchen later that morning, discussing our plans for the holiday week with comfortable ease, I silently acknowledged how far I had traveled from that devastating moment at the credit union. The woman who had confronted her husband's elaborate fraud with evidence, and witnesses had been strong but wounded, fighting for survival and justice. The woman sharing breakfast with James 9 months later retained that strength, but had added something equally valuable: the capacity to remain open to life's possibilities, despite having experienced its profound disappointments. Ryan had spent our savings on his mistress and forged my name on their mortgage documents. Those facts remained unchanged, but they no longer defined my story. They had become instead the opening chapter of a different narrative, one about resilience, reconstruction, and the discovery that sometimes our most significant strengths emerge only when everything we thought was solid has been swept away. 18 months after discovering Ryan's betrayal, I stood in the foyer of my new condominium in Seattle's Belltown neighborhood, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space represented another milestone in my journey of rebuilding, a tangible symbol of financial recovery and personal reclamation. "That's the last box," James announced, setting down a container labeled "Kitchen Fragile" on the granite counter. His forehead glistened from multiple trips up and down the elevator, but his smile remained energetic. "Ready to officially call this place home?" I ran my fingers along the smooth countertop, still somewhat amazed that this beautiful space was actually mine. The down payment had come from a combination of sources: the final restitution payment from Ryan's plea agreement, my carefully rebuilt savings, and an unexpected inheritance from a great aunt who had passed away 3 months earlier. "It feels surreal," I admitted. "A year and a half ago, I was fleeing Portland with whatever fit in my car, financially devastated and emotionally shattered. Now you own a gorgeous condo, lead the trauma coordination program at Seattle Grace, and have an exceptionally handsome boyfriend," James finished with a teasing smile, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I leaned back against his solid presence, allowing myself to fully inhabit this moment of contentment. The journey to this point had been neither simple nor linear. The financial rebuilding had required disciplined saving and careful management of the restitution payments. The emotional reconstruction had demanded even more: therapy to process the betrayal trauma, gradual rebuilding of trust, and the intentional development of a life based on my authentic values rather than accommodating someone else's priorities. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. Instead of my sister Megan, whom we were expecting, I found an elegantly arranged gift basket in the hallway. The card attached read, "Congratulations on your new home. The Seattle Grace team is lucky to have you. Patricia Hamilton, Chief of Emergency Services." "A housewarming gift from the chief herself," James observed, examining the basket as I brought it inside. "That's not standard protocol." "She's been incredibly supportive since the trauma coordination program exceeded its benchmarks last quarter," I explained. "I'm presenting our results at the regional medical conference next month." James's expression reflected genuine pride. "As you should be. Your protocol implementations have reduced critical response times by nearly 22%. That's extraordinary, Lauren." His sincere celebration of my professional accomplishments was among the many qualities that distinguished my relationship with James from what I'd experienced with Ryan. Where Ryan had subtly competed with my success, James found genuine joy in it. Where Ryan had gradually isolated me from independent achievements, James actively encouraged my professional growth. When Megan and her husband Jake arrived with food and champagne, the four of us celebrated amid partially unpacked boxes, raising glasses to new beginnings. "To Lauren," Megan proposed the first toast, her expression a mixture of pride and protective affection, "who pulled herself from the ashes of betrayal and built something beautiful and authentic." "To finding strength in adversity," Jake added, his normally stoic demeanor softened by genuine emotion. "To chosen family," James contributed, his gaze encompassing all of us. When my turn came, I looked around at these 3 people who had formed my core support system through the darkest period of my life. "To resilience," I said simply, "and to all of you who helped me rediscover mine." Later that evening, after Megan and Jake had departed, and James and I were arranging the bedroom furniture, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender's name, Ryan Thompson, sent an unexpected jolt through my system. The subject line read simply, "Congratulations on your new position." I stared at the notification, uncertain whether to open it or delete it unread. James, noticing my sudden stillness, set down the lamp he was positioning and came to my side. "What is it?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "An email from Ryan." I showed him the notification. First direct contact in over a year. James's expression turned cautious. "Do you want to read it?" I considered the question seriously. Early in my recovery, my therapist had emphasized the importance of maintaining boundaries with someone who had caused such profound harm. Reading this message would be a choice to allow Ryan's voice back into my carefully reconstructed life. "I think I need to," I decided finally. Not because I expect anything worthwhile from him, but because I don't want the mere existence of this message hanging over me. With James beside me, I opened the email on my phone. "Lauren," Ryan had written, "I recently learned about your promotion to Trauma Coordination Director and your upcoming presentation at the regional conference. Congratulations. I won't pretend. Our history isn't complicated, or that my actions didn't cause significant harm. The mandatory therapy required by my probation has forced some difficult self-reflection. I'm writing not to ask forgiveness, which I haven't earned, but to acknowledge that despite my attempts to undermine your financial security, you have clearly thrived professionally. That speaks to strengths I failed to recognize or respect during our marriage. I wish you continued success. Ryan." I read the message twice, searching for hidden manipulations or subtle digs beneath the seemingly straightforward acknowledgement. Finding none, I passed the phone to James. "What do you think?" I asked when he finished. "It seems surprisingly self-aware," James observed cautiously. "Though the timing is interesting, given your recent visibility with the conference announcement. I'm not going to respond," I decided after further reflection. There's nothing to be gained from reopening that connection. I deleted the email and returned my attention to arranging our bedroom, refusing to allow Ryan's unexpected intrusion to dominate the joy of this milestone day. The fact that I could receive such communication without emotional devastation was itself evidence of how far I had traveled on my recovery journey. 3 days before the medical conference, I was working late in my office at Seattle Grace, refining my presentation slides, when my desk phone rang with an internal call from the ER. "Lauren, it's Melissa from Triage," came the urgent voice when I answered. "We have a situation you should be aware of. A patient just came in, male, mid-30s, presenting with multiple facial lacerations and possible orbital fracture. He's asking specifically for you." "For me?" I frowned, setting aside my work. "Did he give a name?" "Ryan Thompson says he's your ex-husband." The notification sent a cold shock through my system. "Ryan, here in Seattle? Injured and specifically requesting me?" In the elevator descending to the ER level, I mentally prepared myself for this unexpected encounter. Ryan's presence in Seattle could not be coincidental. He must have deliberately traveled here, whether to attend the medical conference where I was presenting or for some other purpose related to me. The ER was busy, but not chaotic. Melissa met me at the nurse's station, her expression concerned. "Curtain 3, she directed me. "Dr. Chen is with him now. Security is standing by, given the history you've documented in your personnel file." As I approached Curtain 3, I could hear James's professional voice conducting a standard assessment. Drawing a deep breath, I pushed aside the privacy curtain to find Ryan seated on the examination table, his face bearing multiple lacerations, his left eye swollen nearly shut, dried blood crusting his hairline. Our eyes met, and a complex expression crossed his battered face. Recognition, wariness, something that might have been shame. "Lauren," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "I didn't know if they'd actually tell you I was here." "Mr. Thompson," I replied, defaulting to professional formality. "I understand you requested me specifically. I'm the Trauma Coordination Director now, not generally involved in direct patient care." James's expression remained absolutely professional, though the slight tension in his jaw revealed his awareness of the situation's complexity. "What happened?" I directed the question to Ryan, shifting into assessment mode. "Bar fight," he replied, wincing as James gently probed the area around his swollen eye. "Guy recognized me from the news coverage of the mortgage fraud case, called me out publicly." "Are you currently residing in Seattle?" I kept my tone neutral. Ryan shook his head slightly, then grimaced at the movement. "No, here for the medical supply conference at the convention center. Working for a pharmaceutical distribution company now." He hesitated, then added, "I saw your name on the presenter list for the medical conference. didn't plan to approach you. I assisted James with treating Ryan's injuries, maintaining professional distance despite his attempts at more personal conversation. When the immediate care was complete and he was waiting for transport to radiology, he tried once more. "Lauren, I know I have no right to ask anything of you," he began, his expression difficult to read through the swelling and bandages. "But I've been doing the work in therapy to understand the patterns that led to my behavior. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that I recognize the magnitude of harm I caused." The words sounded rehearsed, yet there was something in his demeanor that suggested genuine discomfort, not the smooth charm he had once deployed so effectively, but the awkward vulnerability of someone confronting uncomfortable truths. Transport. Arrived to take Ryan to radiology before I could formulate a response. As they wheeled him away, he spoke once more. "I don't expect a response. I just needed to say it directly. Whatever life you've built here, you deserve good things, Lauren. I regret being the person who tried to take them from you." Later that night, lying beside James in the peaceful darkness of my new home, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 18 months. The discovery of Ryan's betrayal had initially appeared to be the destruction of everything I had built: financial security, marital connection, basic trust in my own judgment. Yet, from that devastation had emerged a life more aligned with my authentic values. "What are you thinking about?" James asked softly, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on my shoulder. "How life's most challenging moments sometimes create space for unexpected growth," I replied honestly. If Ryan hadn't betrayed me so completely, I might still be in Portland, accommodating his priorities while subordinating my own, never discovering what I was capable of building independently. James considered this thoughtfully. "There's wisdom in finding meaning through difficulty without minimizing the real harm that was caused," he observed. "Recognizing your own resilience and capacity for growth doesn't excuse his actions." "Exactly," I agreed, appreciating as always his nuanced perspective. I wouldn't have chosen this path. The betrayal, the financial devastation, the need to rebuild from scratch, none of that was welcome. But having traveled it, I can acknowledge that the destination has value, even if the journey was forced upon me. The regional medical conference opened 2 days later. My presentation on Seattle Grace's trauma coordination protocol was scheduled for the second day in the main auditorium, a prime spot that reflected the significance the hospital administration placed on the program's success. As I navigated the convention center, I remained alert to the possibility of encountering Ryan again. The pharmaceutical conference was housed in the same facility, with shared common areas. That awareness proved prescient when I spotted him in the central atrium during an afternoon break. His face still visibly battered despite efforts to minimize the appearance of injury. He was engaged in conversation with other pharmaceutical company representatives, his demeanor professional despite his obvious discomfort. Our eyes met briefly across the crowded space. Ryan offered a slight, respectful nod of acknowledgement, but made no move to approach me, a boundary I appreciated. I returned the nod with similar reserve before continuing to my next session, experiencing, again, that curious emotional distance. This man who had once been the center of my life, whose betrayal had nearly destroyed everything I had built, now registered as little more than a footnote in my current reality. My presentation the following morning exceeded my expectations. Standing before a packed auditorium of healthcare professionals, I outlined the development and implementation of Seattle Grace's trauma coordination protocol, presenting the impressive statistical outcomes and addressing questions with confident expertise. Chief Hamilton's presence in the front row, along with 2 hospital board members, underscored the professional importance of this moment. Their evident approval as the presentation concluded suggested potential advancement opportunities I couldn't have imagined 18 months earlier when fleeing Portland with only what fit in my car. As the last audience member departed and I began gathering my materials, Chief Hamilton approached with the board members, their expressions plainly impressed. "Excellent work, Lauren," Hamilton said warmly. "The board members would like to discuss the clinical operations director position with you over lunch, if you're available." The invitation represented potential career advancement I had been working toward for months. "I'd be honored," I replied sincerely. The lunch discussion proved even more promising than anticipated, with board members outlining an expanded vision for the clinical operations director role that aligned perfectly with my professional goals. By the time we concluded, I had an informal offer for the position, with formal details to be finalized upon return to Seattle Grace. When I shared the news with James that evening during our celebratory dinner, his genuine excitement for my advancement confirmed yet again the healthier foundation of our relationship. "This is exactly what you've been working toward," he enthused, raising his glass in a toast. "And entirely earned through your innovation and implementation skills. I couldn't be prouder." His unqualified celebration of my success, without trace of insecurity or competition, represented perhaps the most profound difference between my past and present relationships. On the final day of the conference, as we prepared to check out of the hotel, I received an unexpected delivery, a simple envelope with my name handwritten on the front. Inside was a brief note. "Lauren, I attended your presentation yesterday but kept my distance to avoid creating any discomfort. Your development of the trauma protocol is impressive, as was your presentation of its outcomes. I'm leaving Seattle today and won't attempt further contact. This isn't an effort to re-establish connection, but simply acknowledgement of your professional success. Congratulations on building something meaningful from the wreckage I created. Ryan." I showed the note to James, who read it thoughtfully before handing it back. "What will you do with it?" he asked, neither advising nor judging. I considered the question seriously. The note represented perhaps the most straightforward communication I had ever received from Ryan. No manipulation, no veiled requests, just simple acknowledgement and respect for boundaries. "I think I'll keep it," I decided finally. Not out of lingering attachment, but as tangible evidence of how completely the power dynamic has shifted. He once held such capacity to hurt me. Now, he's just a person from my past who has no impact on my present or future. As we drove back to Seattle, that afternoon, mountains rising majestically against the horizon, I experienced a profound sense of completion. Ryan had spent our savings on his Mistress and forged my name on their mortgage documents, facts that remained unchanged. But those actions, which had once defined my existence and devastated my sense of security, had become merely historical. Events stripped of ongoing emotional power. In their place stood a life reconstructed with intention and authenticity, a professional identity thriving on its own merit, a home created according to my genuine preferences, and relationships built on mutual respect rather than deception. Not despite the devastation Ryan had caused, but because of how it had forced me to rebuild with greater purpose than I might otherwise have achieved. Looking toward Seattle's skyline as we approached the city I now called home, I felt not just peace, but a profound sense of empowerment. The woman who had fled Portland 18 months ago, financially devastated and emotionally shattered, had not merely survived betrayal. She had transformed it into the foundation for a life more authentic, successful, and fulfilling than anything she had lost. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.